Brothers in Arms is the fifth studio album by Dire Straits and the peak of their commercial success. It was the first album in history to sell over 1 million CDs, and most likely a million CD players in the process. In fact, the album is synonymous with the CD format and was regarded as a reference point for its fidelity, with manufacturers Philips using it in their sales outlets to promote this new hi-fi technology. This fresh, made-for-the-80s sound was no accident, with chief songwriter, singer and guitarist Mark Knopfler searching for this fidelity from the off. Knopfler had never been satisfied with how analog tape changed the sound of the music they were recording. For some, even today, the way analog tape saturates and changes the EQ of a recording is actually desired. For Knopfler, it was considered an unwanted hindrance. Neil Dorfsman, who would co-produce the album with Knopfler, said, "One of the things that I totally respected about him was his interest in technology as a means of improving his music. He was always willing to spend on high-quality equipment." The studio they chose to record in was George Martin's studio on the island of Montserrat. Opened in 1979, the studio provided an idyllic and peaceful getaway for many top artists in the 80s, including Elton John, The Police, Paul McCartney and the Rolling Stones, amongst many others. Air Montserrat, as it was called, was seen as the perfect place to escape the distractions of the industry and focus on recording. The studio's pool or the beach for windsurfing lessons were the only real activities outside of recording, which was a million miles from having to contend with the demands of everyday life back home. The band were well rehearsed before setting off, although guitarist Hal Linders departed early to be replaced by Jack Sonney, although his only contribution was the guitar synthesizer part on The Man's Too Strong. Another addition to the band was keyboard player Guy Fletcher, who would play an important role in modernising the sound with a rig of synthesizers, including the Yamaha DX1, which you can hear throughout Money for Nothing. The Roland Jupiter 8 was mainly used for pad and string type sounds, and a synclavier featuring prominently in the intro for Money for Nothing. The studio space wasn't all that big, especially for a large band with many instruments. The main room was only 20 by 25 feet, Dorfsman said. It was a good sounding studio, but the main room itself was nothing to write home about. The sound of that studio was the desk. The desk he's referring to was the Neve 8078, which was famously used as a dance floor by the Police guitarist Andy Summers in their video Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic. Engineers, look away now. With Knopfler's desire for increased fidelity, Money for Nothing was pioneering in that it was one of the first albums to be recorded digitally. Released in 1982, but not mass-produced until 1984, the Sony Dash PCM 3324 recorded 16-bit at 44.1 kHz or 48 kHz and would set you back a cool $150,000, or nearly $500,000 in today's money. And that's just for 24 tracks. If you wanted 48 tracks, then you could easily sync up two machines at a cost of nearly $1 million. Terry Williams drums were placed in the corner of the room and mic'd up with an AKG D12 and Electro Voice RE20 on the kick. A Shure SM57 and AKG C451 were used for the snare, with the C451s also being used for overheads. And hi-hat. Sennheiser MD421s were used on the toms, and a pair of Neumann U87s were employed as room mics, which was set back away from the kit. Alan Clark's piano was set up in the studio's small booth and mic'd up with AKG C414s. The Hammond was in the main room, with its Leslie speaker squashed into an airlock next to the control room. And John Isley's bass amp was placed in the vocal booth and mic'd up with a Neumann FET47, with a DI also taken. Knopfler's amplifiers were in the main room with gobos and blankets separating the two amps. His main amp was the Marshall JTM45, which can be heard on Money for Nothing among other songs. This was mic'd up with a Shure SM57, an AKG C451 and a Neumann U67. Fletcher's synths were in the control room. Knopfler's main guitars included his '84 Gibson Les Paul Standard, but this and a Marshall JTM45 will only get you so far to his famous tone on Money for Nothing. He also used a wah pedal fixed at a certain point to bring out the mid-frequencies, which would give it that quality to stick out in the mix. He used his '83 red Schecter Telecaster on Walk of Life, and a Schecter Stratocaster on Why Worry, as well as others. The guitar featured on the cover was used on The Man's Too Strong. This was a 1937 National steel guitar. His main acoustic was the Ovation Adamus. The guitar used on So Far Away was the Pensa synth controller guitar, which was triggering sounds from the synclavier. For this, Knopfler had a special guitar built by Rudy Pensa's music shop, which had a Stratocaster shape with 2 conventional pickups. You could play it as a normal guitar or blend the guitar sound with the synth sounds. The mic positioning for Knopfler's amplifiers was a complete accident, Dorfsman said. I remember getting a channel to set up to monitor, heading out to the room to move the mics around, and Mark's guitar tech, Ron Eve, getting on the talkback mic and telling me not to touch anything because it sounded amazing as it was. It turns out that one mic was positioned facing the floor, another was not quite on the speaker, and the other was somewhere else. It wasn't how I wanted to set things up. It was probably just left from the night before, when I'd been preparing things for the next day, and had not really finished the setup. Nevertheless, whether it was the phase of the mics or the out-of-phaseness, what we heard was exactly what ended up on the record. Money for Nothing features one of the most inspired cameos of the era, with Sting providing his soaring falsetto for the opening. As perfect and integral as this part became, it wasn't actually predetermined in any way. Knopfler had the line, which was MTV's slogan at that time, "I want my MTV!" put to the tune of Don't Stand So Close to Me. When it came to record, Knopfler casually said, "I wish Sting was here," to which an engineer replied, "He is actually, he's here on holiday." So of course they got him in to sing it. Sting remembers the aftermath though. This was very embarrassing to me. Mark asked me to go in the studio and sing this line, "I want my MTV." He gave me the melody and I thought, oh great, don't stand so close to me. That's a nice quote, it's fun. So I did it and thought nothing of it until my publishers, Virgin, who I'd been at war with for years and have no respect for, decided that was a song they owned. They said they wanted a percentage of Money for Nothing, much to my embarrassment, and they took it. Once all the backing tracks had been recorded, it was time to do the overdubs. And it was at that point, which was over a month into the project, that Knopfler realised the drums, and more seriously the drummer, had to be replaced. Dorfsman had feared this may happen from the beginning, but it took a while for Knopfler to realise it was a major problem. His replacement was Omar Hakim, who was predominantly a jazz drummer from New York. Dorfsman remembers, "The difference once he played was night and day. It really started to sound like a record." Omar is very, very confident as a musician and as a person, and what he brought to it was exactly what we needed, which was kind of a kick in the butt. Beforehand, it wasn't so much a comfort zone in the studio as it was an over-relaxed zone. We were there in Montserrat, it was beautiful. There was lots of swimming, a lot of hanging out, and basically, we got into a thing where the energy slowly ebbed away. It was like being on vacation for a while and losing a little bit of the edge without even realising it. We weren't vibing at all. But then I remember Omar coming in, and it was like a bulldozer. New York attitude and New York energy. Some of Williams' drums remain on the album though, notably on the track Walk of Life and the big crescendo intro for Money for Nothing. Once the backing tracks were finally recorded, it was time for Knopfler to lay down the vocals, which were done using the Neumann U47. Sting used the Telefunken 251 for more top-end brightness. They spent over 2 months in Montserrat, and from there they went to the power station in New York for additional overdubs, using their SSL E-Series desk. This wasn't without its headaches though, as the digital Sony recorders there were not playing nicely, and it initially appeared they'd lost the sax part on Your Latest Trick played by Michael Brecker. Luckily, they were very close to Sony in New York, who assisted in fixing the technical error, and the part was retrieved. The band then flew back to London to rehearse for their upcoming 200-date tour. The Brothers in Arms mix took place over the course of 6 days on an SSL in Studio 2 at the Air Studios on Oxford Street. To add a little warmth, they used 20 Neve modules inserted between the console and the digital tape machine. Dorfsman said, "I mixed a DAT with very nice sounding Prism converters and a pair of Auratones. Brothers in Arms was released in May 1985 and was a huge success. It single-handedly drove the fledgling CD market and became the must-have for all hi-fi enthusiasts. With Money for Nothing's computer-animated video that was inevitably on heavy rotation on MTV, the summer of '85 belonged to Dire Straits, and the following year the album won multiple awards, sealing its place as one of the era's defining records.